if we want to change Bob in the lazy way so that we just flip him, what we need to do is say, Bob, we're going to set your rotation y equal to 0 when you are facing to the right. So technically, we won't see any change yet if I run it, because his rotation y is 0. But if we set its rotation y to 180, we'll notice that he is rotating. You'll also notice that Bob is rotating around his registration point, which is top left corner here. So he's rotating on this line. If you want him to rotate around his middle, we can either offset him while we do it, or the easier method would be to go in and just modify Bob. So instead of rotating along this line or axis right here, but if I do that now, it's going to, I have to change all the frames if I want to adjust it. Well, we can change all the frames. We do have an option called Edit Multiple Frames. So I can now highlight all those frames, select everything, and then move so that now Bob is rotating around his middle. So we can see now here is the main registration point right there. So Bob will rotate on this axis for his rotation y. So we can see this is the lazy method for creating the appearance of facing left or facing right. The better method is we have a left walk cycle, a right walk cycle, a standing still or standing in place animation, and then we cycle through those separate animations depending on which direction I'm going, or even better based on am I moving or not moving. So then we will have a slowdown so it's not an immediate stop when I let go of the keys on the keyboard. Is with Bob, we're specifying how far I want Bob to move each frame with a number right here. And if I look down a few more lines, I have that same number specified a second time. That means if I want to make Bob move faster or make Bob move slower, I have to change a number in two places. In the world of programming, that's considered bad. So instead, what we want to do is we want to modify that a little bit. Because if I had a single value, something like speed x, and I'm not just using speed, but I'm using speed x because then I could also have a speed y, so I could have a speed for moving up and down and a speed for moving left and right. So if I move Bob based on a speed x value instead of 10, then all I have to do is just set that speed x at the beginning. Set it as a variable. And then I don't have to change it twice. It also means if I can get all of these kind of controls for my game set up at the beginning in one centralized location, it makes it real easy just to start tweaking the numbers to dial in the performance, the experience, the qualities that my project has. So I can create a new variable and say var speed x, and this is going to then be, well, 10 was a number, so I'll just call this a number. If I type NU, Flash goes, oh, hey, you mean number, don't you? And then at that point I can just hit return, puts it in, do an equal sign, and I can put in a value. Maybe I'll give them a speed now of 15. Now, as mentioned before, I put spaces after my equal sign here. That is optional. You don't need to do that. I'm putting spaces around operators to try to make the code more legible or readable. but it's not a requirement. If you don't want to put spaces around your operators, you don't have to do so. Now that SpeedX has been set to 15, if I run my project, we'll see he goes really fast. But what I don't like about this, as we watch him going really fast, he's going fast, I let go, and he has instant deceleration, instant stopping. It doesn't really fit with the laws of physics now. It'd be more fun if he didn't slow down quite as quickly. So what that means we can do is we can modify this a little bit, and we can actually change it so that Bob, now that we're using a speed variable, we can control it with a little bit more finesse. Put a little bit of slide action in, because the slide makes it, I think, a little bit more fun. So, looking at what we have here, currently we're telling Bob to adjust his position by SpeedX. And Bob to adjust his position by SpeedX. Now, we can sequence this a little bit differently. So I'm going to just put that statement right there. Now we're going to modify this. So what I'm going to do is comment this old line out so we still see kind of what was there. So Bob's x is being modified by SpeedX. Oops. Notice what happened there? Bob was modified by SpeedX. SpeedX started at 15, but we don't want Bob's x speed to have any value in the beginning. We want it to start out at 0. Let's try again. Now Bob is parked, waiting for something to happen. Now we could say when I press right, SpeedX is equal to, and I'll start with a slower number so he doesn't fly off screen quite as quickly. We're just going to say 5. SpeedX is equal to -5. So if I press left, we make SpeedX negative. If I press right, SpeedX is positive. And then after that, we will adjust Bob by SpeedX's value. So if we run it, nothing. Bob's not moving. If I press right, starts going. Press left, starts going. But what we can see is the only way to, once he's in motion, so once he's in motion, he stays in motion. So a body in motion stays in motion, so it's following, apparently some rule of physics, but there's no friction or anything slowing him down afterward. So that doesn't quite do everything we need yet, but it's a start. So we're modifying that speed there. Let's try. So if I say SpeedX is equal to SpeedX plus 5, I am going to resort to programmer shorthand for writing it, which would be the same as saying plus equals. So that line, line 18, is identical to saying speed x is equal to speed x plus 5. So line 18 and line 19 generate the identical result. If we say plus equals, that is the same as saying my variable is equal to my variable plus my number or amount afterward. So these two lines perform the same operation. If you want to use the verbose line where you write it out in its entirety, I encourage you to do so. If you want to use the shorthand version of plus equals, I would encourage you to do so. So if that works for you, that is the format that you will find in most programming examples these days. If we're taking a value and modifying it by an amount, or adding or subtracting, multiplying or dividing to the current value of the object, we use the kind of operand plus the equal sign. So we'd say minus equals, plus equals, multiply equals, divide equals. So we would specify that. So we could use either. For the demo today, though, I will continue with the long form, even though after tonight we will probably migrate towards the shorthand version. So if we say speed x is equal to that, and then speed x is equal to speed x minus 5. So if you notice now as I'm pressing the key, he's really starting to motor across the screen because he has no speed limit yet, or maximum speed. So I have not assigned a maximum speed. So we're on the right track, but what we need to do is to assign a maximum speed onto it so at least he doesn't start moving with a rocket propulsion system. Though if you're building some type of gameplay, if you've ever played the game Asteroids, the classic arcade game Asteroids, if you start going really fast, you can just keep accelerating to a wicked high speed. So the speed limit in a game like that is extremely high, which allows you to just keep building and building and building your speed, which makes it kind of fun in some ways. So what we need is a speed limit to get factored in here. Now, we can do that by having another variable. Var speed max and at this point I could say something like 10. So what this does when we have a speed limit is we need to check. Now there isn't a built-in constraint where we could say, hey, I want this to be no more than a specific amount. So we're going to have to check that. So we say if speed x is less than speed max, I forget my spaces. So if my speed x is less than my maximum speed, then we can modify Bob by that speed amount. So this now, if we test it again, we can see it's working so far. But we're able to really go into that negative amount because there is no speed limit checking in that other direction. So now we need to build in to the other side as well. So if we think about what we're looking for here, so previously if we said the speed speed x is less than speed max, when speed x, so we don't want to get too high of a positive number. We also don't want to reach too small of a negative number. So we don't want to get too far into the negatives. So it's really if speed x is less than negative speed max, or not, sorry, is greater than so using less thans and greater thans and negatives sometimes gets a little bit confusing, but let's think about speed max is 10. So we want when speed x is greater than negative 10, which would be minus 9, minus 8, minus 7, so everything larger than that, then yeah, sure, we'll add in some more negative speed. And then we can move that in. Now we haven't taken care of the moving indefinitely, but I'm pressing the key and I can't go any faster. Nice part though is if I know I want Bob to move slower, put my speed limit at say 6. Except that because I'm moving 5, then that gives me, that's probably not quite maximum. Now if we notice I have a 5 and a negative 5 here. This is, again, essentially the same number occurring in a positive and negative form. So it kind of would make sense to even set a variable for that. When you start coding, you will realize that your list of variables starts to get really long. That's okay. That's not a bad thing. It's kind of like when you start working in Flash and you get a whole bunch of layers so that you can actually animate without going insane. Well, you might go insane, but that you're able to animate. Having variables is not bad. Don't be afraid of them. So it might make sense to have a speed increment amount, but we'll just leave that for now. I'm going to go with the 10 because I want to at least have some speed amounts. So currently, once Bob is in motion, Bob stays in motion. Even if I'm not pressing the key, and we can see so if I get just right at the right speed values, he is stopping. But because we're doing with my maximum of 5, adding in 5, so 2 clicks is enough to make him stop. So my 5s are giving me the illusion that he can stop. But it's not. It's not great. There is a better system. So what we can say is something like this. So if Bob is moving, actually I'm just going to do this. first. Speed x is equal to speed x times 0.8.
That's not a star.
The star sign or asterisk symbol is how we say multiply. So if I run this, once he's going, you'll notice I let go and he slides. Press slide. That's way more, doesn't that look cooler? It's more fun. It's a little, it's not that immediate stoppage on it. So that's more fun. So now if we want him to slide longer, I can just go for a smaller number here. Or sorry, I need to go for a higher number. That slows him down faster. Do like 9. You can see how he's going. And if you look real close when he stops, you'll see how he starts to get a little bit twitchy as he stops because he starts moving a twixel. Every so often he'll jump a pixel now. Because the speed has been reduced down by a fractional amount, but it's not totally stopped, and he can get a little bit jumpy. And if he was a much smaller piece of artwork, we would probably see it happen more frequently because we could see the change. So at some point, it works well to then put a limit that when we get to moving less than a pixel, or even a fraction of a pixel if we want, then we just set speed x back equal to 0. So we'll look at that in a moment. But the logic here is if I haven't hit my speed limit, I adjust my speed. And then when I'm going right, I adjust speed x by a positive amount. Going left, I adjust it by a negative amount. And then I just add that to Bob. Because if I take his position, add positive or add negative, that moves him in the correct position, because adding a negative is the same as subtraction. So that's the same as where we just use Bob x minus 5. Now what can make this even more fun is if we even set this up to a higher amount, we get even more slide, because we can get more speed. Whee! We're going to get more whee out. So you can see that we get that good slide action going. Now this also tells me that the size of Bob versus the amount of slide versus the size of my movie, they're not compatible elements. He's too big, my stage is too small, and he moves too far per frame, that it would make it really hard to control him. So as far as gameplay goes, I'm going to need a bigger project or a smaller piece of artwork. But this is my starting point. So if we watch Bob closely and long enough, we will see he twitches with this because he will never quite get to 0. Because we'll start moving down a fractional amount if he's moving every frame that I'm not adding to his speed amount. Speed x becomes 90% of what it was before. And then 90% of that, then 90% of that, then 90% of that, 90% of that, and it keeps on going until we move into these fractional pixel amounts. So every so often he will jump a pixel as it's trying to work its way close to 0. So we may need to put that in. In this case, I'm lucking out and it's not doing that. Normally we can watch Bob twitch every so often. You'll see him jump a pixel, or what appears to be a pixel, but it's usually a fractional amount.